So this is objective 2, which is another method for simplifying complex fractions. So this is the method, I call this one the destruction method. And what it is that you're going to destroy the common or the denominators that make it complex without having to create common denominators and flipping and multiplying. So what this looks like is that you notice that this is a complex fraction. And then you have to identify what the lowest common denominator would be for the numerator and for the denominator. So you'll see that this guy has a denominator of y, and this one has a denominator of 3y. So your lowest common denominator would be 3y. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to multiply your complex fraction by 3y over 3y. You're allowed to do that because you're really only multiplying by 1. Now what that's going to end up looking like is that you're going to do 3y times the numerator, and you're going to do 3y times the denominator. And what that's going to do is destroy the denominators that make these complex. So the y divided by y is 1, and 3y divided by 3y is 1. So now what we're left with is 3 times y plus 2 all over 1 times y minus 2. And if you think back to method 1, if you watch that video, that's the exact same answer that we got. Most people do tend to prefer method 2 because it's quick and easy. Now, saying that, I shouldn't use the word easy. It's quick. There's lots of places to make mistakes, but it's quick, and so people like it. Whereas method 1 is really mathematical. It's like, no, this is what we're doing. We're taking a fraction and we're dividing it by a fraction, and you can see that. This one's more using that identity property of multiplication to say, hey, because this is a fraction, I'm allowed to multiply by 1, so why wouldn't I? So again, let's look at this guy. My lowest common denominator, these guys have denominators of 1, so you look at every term separately. So my lowest common denominator would be x. So what you're going to do is you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by x. So you're multiplying the whole fraction by 1. Now what that's going to look like is that you're going to multiply every single term, and this time we have 2 terms in the numerator, by x. And in the denominator, you have another 2 terms. You're going to multiply each of those terms by x. Then you're going to simplify. So you're going to have 4x, and then you're going to have x divided by x is 1, so minus 3. And here you're going to have 5x minus x divided by x is 1, so minus 1. Same answer as we got before, a lot less work. So just make sure that you're really careful about your work, and then you should be fine. So for this one, again, my lowest common denominator is x squared y squared. So here's x squared, the x will go into it, the y squared, the y will go into it. So now we're going to multiply every single term by x squared y squared. So again, we're multiplying the top by x squared y squared, we're multiplying the bottom by x squared y squared, and then you have to distribute through. So I like showing this distribution. I find people make far less mistakes. So you're going to show that you're multiplying every single term in the numerator by x squared y squared, and every single term in the denominator by x squared y squared. Okay, and now we simplify. So for this first one, x squared divided by x squared is 1. I'm left with y squared. For this one, y squared divided by y squared is 1, so I'm left with x squared. Then the x goes into the x squared, so I'm left with 1x y squared. And then the y squared divided by y would be a 1, so I'm left with x squared y. Now I need to make sure that I always simplify. So I see a difference of squares, y minus x times y plus x. And on the bottom, I have a greatest common factor of xy, and you'd be left with y plus x. Then you can see that there's a common factor of y plus x, and so your final answer would be y minus x over xy. So this is the destruction method. Like I said, it's the method most people tend to use. So let's try these next 2 questions using that method. So this says use your method of choice to simplify the following. So this first question, maybe you go back and say, hey, I like the creation one. I just write it as a division. It's already a single fraction divided by a single fraction, flip and multiply. Or maybe you're a purist and you're like, no, I really want to destroy this one. So you have to think about what your lowest common denominator would be. Now before you do that, what I would probably do is factor my denominator. So in other words, I'm going to have negative 3 over y plus 2, y minus 2. Because then hopefully you can see but that the lowest common denominator would be y plus 2, y minus 2. And then you have to multiply. So we're going to multiply the top by y plus 2, y minus 2. And you're going to multiply the bottom by y plus 2, y minus 2. When you do that, y plus 2 divided by y plus 2 is 1. I'm left with 5 times y minus 2. And then the denominator, everything divides, and I'm left with negative 3. And again, this is a perfectly fine answer. Maybe you move the negative sign up to the top. That feels better to me. Maybe you want to multiply through. And again, on a test, I would take any of these three. On a quiz, it's a multiple choice answer, so you have to figure out which one is the right answer. And you know, if yours looks like this, can you turn it into that? If yours looks like this, can you turn it into that? You know, and identifying that it's just three forms of the same answer. Okay, so for this one, again, you're identifying your lowest common denominator, which would be a squared b squared. And again, you're going to multiply every term by a squared b squared. I highly recommend showing that. So take every single term and multiply it by a squared b squared. It takes a little bit more effort, but it makes far less mistakes. Minus a squared b squared over 1 minus b squared. So again, what we've done is we're multiplying the top and the bottom by a squared b squared, and then we're distributing through. Okay, so for on the top, a goes into a squared. I'm left with ab squared. For this one, b squared, or b goes into b squared to be left with a squared b. And then in the denominator, a squared divided by a squared is 1, so I'm left with b squared. B squared divided by b squared is 1, so I'm left with a squared. Then you have to factor. So this method, this destruction method, ends up with a lot of factoring in the end to simplify. So here I'm going to pull out an a and a b to be left with b minus a. And then difference of squares on the bottom. And then I'm going to simplify. I think I forgot to say at the beginning of this section that you should pause the video and try this. So if you just kind of kept watching, that's great, but maybe pause the video now and give this one a go. It's got a bit of a twist to it, and see if you can figure out how you would approach this one. If not, you can keep watching. Okay, so again, the first thing we're going to do is identify my lowest common denominator. Now, these guys are denominators of 1. These ones have denominators of an r and an s. So my lowest common denominator is going to be rs. TUV, I'm having a total blank. I was like, what letter comes before? P, Q, R, S. I always like to write them alphabetically. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to multiply the top by RS, and I'm going to multiply the bottom by RS, and I'm going to distribute through. Now, I've been doing this for a while, so I know that I'm not going to distribute through the numerator, and it'll be clear why in a minute. And it's because I want to leave this S minus R here to simplify. But it's hard to know when you do and when you don't. So my rule of thumb is don't distribute through if you're not getting rid of denominators. Okay, so just leave it because this is in factored form. Otherwise, you're going to have to end up factoring your answer. But I'm going to multiply every single term in the denominator by RS because I want to get rid of those denominators. So in the top, I have RS times S minus R. In the bottom, r divided by r is 1, so I'm left with an s. And in here, s divided by s is 1, and I'm left with an r. And because I left this in factored form, I can simplify the s minus r and be left with rs. So that's method 2, which I call the destruction method. It does tend to be people's method of choice. Just be careful. My biggest word of warning is show your work. Show that you're multiplying every single term by that lowest common denominator.